You want to know what the heartbeat of a mid-sized airline looks like. It doesn't look like those smiling stewardesses with the terrifyingly perfect teeth on the billboards. It doesn't look like the shiny, polished fuselage of a Boeing 737 sitting on the tarmac like a golden calf waiting for worship. No, the heartbeat of this industry looks like a windowless bunker in Queens that smells like burnt popcorn, anxiety, and the distinct, metallic tang of a breakdown waiting to happen. It looks like me, Nicole, staring at a wall of monitors at 4 o'clock a.m., nursing a cup of coffee that tastes like it was brewed in an ashtray, praying that the de-icing trucks in Minneapolis actually show up before the FAA decides to crawl up my ass with a flashlight. For 11 years, I've been the operations lead. That's a fancy title for professional turd polisher. My job is simple. I take the logistical nightmare of flying metal tubes full of entitled tourists and business bros across the country, and I make sure they don't crash into each other or get stuck in a holding pattern over O'Hare until they run out of fuel and hope. I am the invisible hand. I am the reason your luggage actually makes it to Denver, even if your soul died somewhere over Nebraska. The system we use, it's called Aerolink. It sounds futuristic, right? Like something Elon Musk would tweet about while high. In reality, Aerolink is a patchwork monstrosity of code written in the late 90s by a guy named Dave who probably died of a stroke at his keyboard. It's held together by digital duct tape, prayers, and a series of legacy overrides that and only I, know how to navigate. It's a temperamental beast. You treat it right, you feed it the right data codes, and it hums. You look at it sideways or God forbid. You try to optimize it without asking permission, and it will ground a fleet faster than a pilot failing a breathalyzer. This particular Tuesday started like every other Tuesday for the last decade. I walked into the OCC, the hum of the servers vibrating in my fillings. The floor is covered in that industrial carpet that was probably gray once but is now a shade of despair beige. I sat down at my station, the command throne, which is actually just a Herman Miller chair with a broken lumbar support that I stole from HR 3 years ago. Morning, sunshine, grunted heavyset Mike, my shift supervisor. Mike looks like a thumb with a mustache. He was eating a breakfast burrito that smelled like a biological weapon. Don't start with me, Mike, I said, logging in. The screen flickered green. My reflection in the monitor looked back at me, bags under my eyes big enough to check without a fee. Hair pulled back in a bun so tight it was practically a facelift. How's the eastern seaboard? Fucked, Mike mumbled, spraying crumbs. Storm front in the Carolinas. Boston is already delaying ground crews, and we've got a warning light on the routing server. It's the Tuesday update lag, I said, cracking my knuckles. I'll bypass the handshake protocol. Just keep the crews on standby. I typed, fast. My fingers know the keyboard better than they know the touch of another human being. That's sad, isn't it? That's the life. You trade intimacy for uptime. You trade your youth for a pension that probably won't exist when you get there. Within 10 minutes, I had rerouted 3 flights out of Charlotte, bribed a gate agent in Newark with a promise of overtime, and manually patched the server lag before the automated system could trigger a fleet-wide panic. The warning light blinked off. Green. Beautiful, soothing green. See, people think planes fly on jet fuel. They don't. They fly on the sheer, unadulterated stubbornness of people like me who refuse to let the universe win. The universe wants chaos. It wants weather delays and mechanical failures and pilots sleeping with flight attendants and screwing up the roster. I am the wall against the chaos. By the way, before I tell you how this whole house of cards came crashing down thanks to a pair of Gucci-wearing morons, do me a solid. Hit that subscribe button and give this a like. It's the only dopamine hit I get these days besides watching my enemies fail. It helps the algorithm or whatever, and frankly, I need the validation because my therapist quit. Okay, back to the grime. I was feeling good. I was feeling like a god of logistics. I had my lukewarm sludge coffee, I had my green screens, and I had the illusion of control. But you know what they say about the illusion of control. It's usually shattered by someone with a teeth-whitening addiction and an MBA they bought online. At 9 o'clock a.m., the door to the OCC swung open. Usually, nobody comes in here unless something is burning or someone is fired. The air pressure in the room actually changed. The smell of burnt popcorn was instantly replaced by an aggressive cloud of Santal 33 and entitlement. I spun my chair around, standing there, looking like they just wandered off the set of a reality show about people who have never cleaned a toilet, were Blake and Courtney. Blake is the owner's son. He's 32, has the jawline of a superhero and the business acumen of a ham sandwich. He spent the last 5 years on a spiritual sabbatical in Bali, which I assume is code for doing coke off a surfboard. Now, he was back, wearing a suit that cost more than my annual rent. The title that meant nothing, Chief Strategy Officer, and clinging to his arm like a barnacle with a blowout was Courtney. Courtney was a lot. She was a former lifestyle influencer turned operations enthusiast. She had eyes that were dead inside but surrounded by perfect lashes, and she was holding a tablet like it was the 10 Commandments. Nicole, Blake boomed, flashing a smile that was all veneers and no warmth. Just the lady we wanted to see. My stomach dropped. It was the same feeling you get when you hear a weird grinding noise in your car's transmission miles from civilization. Blake, I said, not standing up. To what do I owe the pleasure? The coffee machine is broken if that's what you're looking for. Oh no, we're not here for coffee, Courtney chimed in. Her voice was high, airy, like she was talking to a toddler or a golden retriever. We're here to observe. Blake's dad thinks it's time we really understood the core of the business, you know. Streamline things? Streamline? I hate that word. Streamline is corporate speak for fire the people who know what they're doing and replace them with an app that doesn't work. Streamline, I repeated flatly. Well, right now I'm streamlining a 747 around a thunderstorm in Atlanta so 300 people don't die. So observe away. Just don't touch anything. Blake laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Always a firecracker, Nicole. That's what Dad loves about you, the grit. But we're thinking, maybe we can modernize that grit, make it scalable. He walked over to my bank of monitors, reaching out a manicured hand toward the screen displaying the raw code of the Aero Link roster. Don't, I snapped. He froze. Relax, Nicole, it's just data. It's not data, Blake, it's a live artery. You touch that screen, you might accidentally cancel a fuel order in Detroit. You want to explain to a plane full of angry passengers why they're stuck on the tarmac smelling the lavatory for 4 hours? He pulled his hand back, but his eyes narrowed. For a second, the mask slipped. The chill Bali bro vanished, and I saw the petulant prince who's never been told no in his life. We have a meeting at noon, Blake said, his voice dropping an octave. Boardroom, be there. We need to discuss the future. I'm busy keeping the present alive, Blake. It wasn't a request, Nicole. They turned and left, trailing their cloud of expensive perfume. The door clicked shut. The silence that followed was heavy. Mike looked at me over his burrito. That felt ominous. Yeah, I said, turning back to my screens. The green code blurred for a second. That felt like the beginning of the end, Mike. Better check your LinkedIn. I didn't know it then, but I was right. The storm in the Carolinas was nothing compared to the shitstorm that had just walked out the door. I walked into the boardroom at noon sharp. The room was mostly glass, overlooking the hangar. It was a cruel architectural joke. The suits could look down at the mechanics busting their knuckles and sweating grease while sipping their sparkling water. It was like a zoo exhibit for the working class. The founder, Old Man Henderson, wasn't there. That was the first red flag. Henderson was a dinosaur, a man who built this airline with a single Piper Cub and a lot of questionable loans in the 70s. He shouted, he drank scotch at 10 a.m., but he respected the hustle. If Henderson was absent, it meant the asylum was officially being run by the inmates. Blake sat at the head of the table. Courtney was to his right, typing furiously on her tablet, probably updating her girl boss Pinterest board. The rest of the table was filled with the terrified faces of middle management, people who had mortgages and kids with braces and were currently calculating how long their severance would last. Okay, team, let's pivot, Blake announced as I sat down. He didn't even look up. We've been analyzing the metrics with Courtney's new insights. Courtney's insights. I almost choked on my own spit. Courtney's last job was marketing a detox tea that made people shit their pants in public. Now she was analyzing aviation logistics. So Courtney started, standing up and dimming the lights. A PowerPoint projected onto the wall. The first slide just said vibe shift in neon pink font. I wish I was joking. I really do. We feel that the airline is too reactive, Courtney said, gesturing vaguely. Ops is always putting out fires. We want to be proactive. Want to use AI to predict the fires before they happen. That's called weather forecasting, I said from the back. We already do that. It's on Channel 4. A few nervous titters from the accounting guys. Blake glared at me. Funny, Nicole, but we're talking about structural productivity. For example, she clicked to the next slide. It showed a map of our hub in Chicago. Why do we have so many redundant routes to Milwaukee? It seems wasteful. The algorithm says we can cut 40% of those flights and just use larger planes on a consolidated schedule. I leaned forward. The rage was starting to bubble up in my chest, hot and acidic like heartburn. Courtney, I said, keeping my voice dangerously low. We fly the CRJ-200s to Milwaukee because the runway at the secondary airport can't handle the weight of the larger 737s. If you consolidate to big planes, you have to fly into the main hub, which has a landing fee that is 3 times higher. You will lose $2 million a month in fees alone. Also, the CRJs are for business commuters. They need frequency, not capacity. You cut the frequency, they switch to Delta. Silence, the kind of silence where you can hear the air conditioning wheezing. Courtney blinked. She looked at Blake. Blake looked at the table. Well, Blake said, clearing his throat, that's just legacy thinking. You can negotiate the fees. I know a guy. You know a guy who controls the Chicago Port Authority? I asked. Is his name God? Because that's who sets the rates. Enough, Blake snapped. The point is the ops department is bloated. We have too many people monitoring systems that should be automated. We're paying for expertise we don't need. He looked directly at me then. We're going to implement a new dashboard. Salesforce integration. It's going to visualize the data so anyone can run ops. We won't need specialists hoarding information. I saw what this was. This wasn't about efficiency. This was about ego. They looked at me, a 45-year-old woman in a polyester company polo, smelling like stale coffee, and they saw a relic. They saw a glitch in their sleek, modern matrix. They hated that I knew where the bodies were buried. They hated that they needed me. So they decided they didn't. For the next 2 weeks, the vibe shift began. It was a massacre. They fired Jerry, the maintenance scheduler. Jerry had a limp and a bad attitude, but he could juggle parts inventory in his head. They replaced him with a scheduling bot that immediately ordered 400 airplane toilets and 0 brake pads. They cut the night shift at the help desk. Nobody flies at 3 a.m., Blake argued. Except for the cargo haulers that make up 30% of our revenue. You absolute walnut, I watched it all happen. I tried to fight. I sent emails. I printed reports. I highlighted the catastrophic risks in bright yellow marker. Response from Blake, thanks for the feedback, Nicole. Let's stay positive and trust the process. The smiley face, that passive-aggressive, soulless colon parenthesis, it was the digital equivalent of spitting in my face. Courtney started shadowing me. That meant she sat in my office, scrolling through TikTok, occasionally looking up to ask stupid questions. Why are there so many codes? Can't we just color code the flights? Pink for on time, red for late? Because Courtney, I gritted out, slamming a reroute command into the console. The codes tell us why it's late. Mechanical, crew, weather, AC. A red color doesn't tell me if I need a mechanic or a priest. You're so negative, she sighed, blowing a bubble with her gum. You really need to work on your energy. It's affecting the team culture. The team culture? The team was terrified. Everyone was walking on eggshells. The break room, once a loud, raucous place where we traded war stories and gambled on arrival times, was now silent as a morgue. I went home that Friday and drank a bottle of cheap Pinot Grigio straight from the bottle while watching infomercials for pressure washers. I felt dirty. Not the honest dirt of a hard day's work, but the slimy, spiritual grime of watching something you built get dismantled by children playing with matches. I knew they were coming for me next. I could feel it in my bones like a storm front. They couldn't fire me yet. I held the keys to the kingdom. The legacy override. The custom scripts I wrote that bridged the gap between the ancient mainframe and the modern web interface. If I left, the bridge would burn. But they didn't know that. They thought it was all just data. So, I made a decision. If they wanted to drive the car, I'd let them. But first, I was going to remove the steering wheel. There's a specific kind of calm that comes over you when you decide to let the world burn. It's not peace exactly. It's more like the silence in the eye of a hurricane. You know the destruction is coming, you know the roof is about to get ripped off, but for this one moment, you just stand there and watch the barometer drop. I stopped arguing. That was the first sign, but they were too stupid to see it. Monday morning meeting, I just nodded. We're cutting the turnaround time in Dallas to 20 minutes, Blake announced, looking for a fight. Old Nicole would have screamed. 20 minutes isn't enough time to deplane, clean, fuel, and board unless you're throwing passengers out the emergency exits while taxiing. New Nicole just sipped her coffee. Great initiative, Blake. Very bold. Courtney beamed. See, I told you she'd get on board. It's all about mindset. Mindset. Yeah, my mindset was currently focused on creating a localized apocalypse. I went back to my desk and started the digital house cleaning. See, over the years, I'd written about 4,000 lines of custom script to keep AeroLink functional. These weren't official updates. IT didn't even know about half of them. They were patches, workarounds, band-aids made of code. Example, when the crew roster system crashes, which it does every Thursday, my script automatically pulls the backup data from payroll so we don't lose the pilot assignments. Without that script, the system just displays error 404, pilot not found, and the planes sit there until someone manually calls 300 pilots. I didn't delete the scripts. That would be illegal. That would be sabotage. I'm not a criminal. I'm a professional. Instead, I simply centralized them. I moved all my custom operational protocols into a single, encrypted user directory on the local server. My user directory, the one that was tied to my active employee credentials. The logic was sound. These are my personal productivity tools. If I am employed, they run. If I am not employed, well, access is revoked. Security protocol, right? Can't have former employees accessing the system. I spent 3 days doing this. I worked late. Courtney stopped by once, seeing me furiously typing. Wow, burning the midnight oil? Love the hustle, she chirped. Just documenting everything for the transition, I said, not lying. Making sure everything is in its right place. Perfect. We're bringing in the consultants from Deloitte next week to map the workflow. They're going to love what they find, I muttered. What was that? I said, I hope they're kind. By Thursday, the trap was set. My legacy override was now the structural load-bearing wall of the entire operation, and the detonator was my employment status. But I needed one more thing. A paper trail. A SIA, cover your ass, document so thick it could stop a bullet. I dug up an old compliance agreement from 2014. It was a dusty PDF regarding intellectual property of custom tools. It basically said that any code written by an employee specifically for personal workflow optimization remained the responsibility of that employee to maintain, unless formally transferred to IT with a 60-day review period. It was a loophole meant to stop programmers from claiming ownership of the company website, but the wording was vague. Personal workflow optimization. My scripts were personal. They optimized my workflow. I printed it out. I signed it. I buried it in a stack of hiring onboarding documents I sent to HR for the new interns. Nobody reads that shit. It was filed away in the basement of bureaucracy. The atmosphere in the OCC was getting weird. The new hires Blake brought in were useless. They were kids in skinny jeans who thought logistics meant ordering Uber Eats. One of them, a guy named Tyler, it's always a Tyler, came up to me. Hey, Nicole, the system is throwing a dependency error on the fuel manifests. Weird, I said, not looking up. Did you try rebooting? Yeah, it says admin authorization required. Advance, that's me. Oh, just hit bypass, I said. I'll authorize it later. Cool, thanks. They were already hitting the walls of the maze I built, but they were just climbing over them, assuming I'd always be there to catch them on the other side. That Friday afternoon, the summon came. Outlook notification, meeting, HR and strategy. 3:00 p.m., no subject line, no agenda. I knew what it was the execution. I looked around the OCC one last time. I looked at the flickering screens, the gray carpet, Mike wiping mustard off his shirt. I felt a pang of sadness. I loved this dump. I loved the chaos. But you can't save a house when the owners are dousing it in gasoline and handing you a match. I opened my desk drawer. I took out my personal hard drive, empty. I wiped it. I took my framed photo of my dog deceased, much like my career. I took my stash of emergency headache medicine. I put them in my bag. I stood up. Mike, I said, yeah, boss, if the routing server asks for level 5 handshake tonight, don't force it, just let it cycle. Mike looked at me, confused. Okay, you going somewhere? Just a meeting, I said. Hold down the fort, always do. I walked to the elevator. My heart was pounding, a heavy, dull thud against my ribs. It wasn't fear. It was the adrenaline of a soldier walking into an ambush she already knew was there. I checked my watch. 2:58 p.m. The first bank of flights, the Friday rush, was scheduled to push back from the gates at 4:30 p.m. Timing is everything in aviation. I smoothed my shirt. I put on my best customer service face, one that says I am listening while thinking about murder. I stepped into the elevator, going up. The HR office smelled like fear and cheap sanitizer. It was a small beige room designed to suck the soul out of you before they even handed you the paperwork. Blake was there, sitting behind the desk like he was judging a talent show. Courtney was next to him, looking aggressively sympathetic, practicing her sad pout face. And in the corner, the HR rep, a woman named Linda who looked like she wanted to be literally anywhere else on Earth, probably diving into a volcano. Have a seat, Nicole, Blake said, gesturing to the chair. The chair was lower than theirs. Classic power move. I remained standing. I prefer to stand, Blake. My back acts up when I sit near bullshit. Blake's jaw tightened. Okay, let's make this quick. We've been reviewing the structural changes for the ops department. And I asked, checking my watch. 3:05 p.m. And Courtney interjected, her voice dripping with fake honey. We feel that your traditional approach isn't aligning with the agile, future-forward vision we have for the brand. We need energy. We need fresh eyes. We need synergy. Synergy, I repeated. Is that the word for firing the only person who knows how the server works? See, Courtney pointed a manicured finger at me. That negativity. It's toxic, Nicole. We're building a family here. You're acting like a mechanic. I am a mechanic, I snapped. I fix the things you break. But please go on, fire me, say the words. Don't hide behind synergy. Be a big boy, Blake. Blake stood up, his face reddening. You are terminated, effective immediately. For insubordination and failure to adapt to new company protocols. Linda from HR slid a folder across the desk. We've prepared a severance package. 2 weeks pay. Standard NDA. If you sign now, we won't contest unemployment. 2 weeks. 11 years of keeping their planes in the sky, 11 years of missed Christmases and Thanksgiving dinners eaten out of a vending machine, and they offered me 2 weeks. It was insulting. It was perfect. I didn't look at the folder. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my ID badge. The plastic was cracked, the lanyard frayed. It had my face on it from a decade ago, looking hopeful. I didn't recognize that girl anymore. I tossed the badge onto the desk. It landed with a plastic clack right on top of Courtney's iPad. Keep the money, I said. I don't want your severance, and I'm not signing your NDA. You have to sign, Blake said, confused. Everyone signs, not me. Because if I sign that, I can't consult. And you're going to need a consultant very, very soon. Blake laughed. You think we can't run this place without you? We have the dashboard. We have the data. I looked at him. I looked deep into his empty, trust fund eyes. Blake, you have a dashboard that displays data I curate. You have a system that runs on logic, I wrote. You think you bought a self-driving car. You didn't. You bought a stick shift and you just fired the driver while doing 80 on the highway. I turned to the door. Wait, Courtney said. You need to hand over your passwords. They're in the drawer, I lied. Written on a sticky note. Just like you like it, I opened the door. The hallway air felt cooler, cleaner. I stopped and looked back one last time. Hey Blake, what? He snarled. The server creates a temporary cache for the flight roster every 4 hours. It's due to refresh at 3:30. That's in 20 minutes, so when the cache clears, it looks for an active user authorization to rebuild the bridge to the mainframe. If it doesn't find one, Well, it gets confused. We have IT. Blake scoffed. Get out. Tell your dad I said good luck, I said. I walked out. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and descended. As the doors closed, I pulled out my phone. I opened the admin app for the server, the one on my personal phone. Status connected. User Envance action logout. A prompt popped up. Warning, logging out will terminate active session scripts. Are you sure? My thumb hovered over the screen. I thought about the 2-week severance. I thought about Courtney's vibe shift. I thought about old man Henderson letting his idiot son play God with my life. I pressed YES. Status disconnected. I walked out of the building and into the sunlight. The air smelled like jet fuel and freedom. The clock started ticking. There's a bar about a mile from the airport called the Final Approach. It's the kind of place where the floor is sticky, the lighting is non-existent, and the bartender, a guy named Sal, knows your drink before you sit down. It's a sanctuary for pilots who have timed out, flight attendants with sore feet, and ground crew who just need to forget the last 8 hours. I walked in at 3:15 p.m. The place was empty, save for a couple of baggage handlers in the corner arguing about the Knicks. Early day, Nick? Sal asked, wiping a glass with a rag that was arguably dirtier than the glass. Permanent vacation, Sal, I said, sliding onto a stool. Give me a grandiose amount of tequila, the cheap stuff. I want to feel it burn, Sal poured. I drank. I propped my phone up against the napkin holder. I didn't have access to the internal system anymore, but I had something better, Flight Aware, the public tracking app. I watched the little yellow plane icons moving across the map. 3:25 p.m. Everything looked normal. 3:30 p.m. The cache refresh. Somewhere in the server room, a line of code was reaching out for my digital hand and grasping nothing but air. In my mind, I could see the OCC. Mike would be finishing his burrito. The vibe shift dashboard on the big screen would be displaying all green lights. Then the first glitch would happen. It wouldn't be big, just a flicker. Maybe flight 402 to Miami would suddenly show a departure time of null. Mike would frown. He'd tap his keyboard. Hey, Tyler. The Miami flight just dropped its tag. Probably just a sensor, Tyler would say, chewing on his pen. Refresh it, Mike would refresh. And when he did, the system would look for the backup script, my script, to reload the data. Access denied. Back in the bar, I watched the app. 3:45 p.m. Flight 402 suddenly changed status from on time to delayed. Then Flight 89 to Boston, delayed. Then Flight 112 to Seattle, delayed. Here we go, I whispered, taking another shot. Inside the OCC, the vibe shift dashboard would be freaking out. The pretty visualizations Courtney loved, they relied on clean data. When the data got corrupted, the graphs would start looking like a seismograph during an earthquake. Why is everything turning red? Courtney would be screeching. Blake, fix it. Blake would be yelling at it. Reboot the server. Turn it off and on. But you can't reboot a missing limb. My phone buzzed. A known number. I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again and again. Then a text from Mike. Nick, WTF is happening? System is locking us out of gate assignments. We have 2 planes taxiing to the same gate. Pilots are screaming. I didn't reply. I took a sip of my beer. It's a terrible thing, watching a disaster you engineered. It's also intoxicating. I imagined the pilots on the radio. Tower, this is Flight 664. We have no gate assignment. Holding on taxiway Bravo. Flight 664, Tower. We show you at gate C4. Negative, Tower. C4 is occupied by a Delta Airbus. Where do you want us? Stand by? Our screen just went blank. The drift had begun. Without the routing logic, the automated system reverts to the default factory settings from 1998. It doesn't know about the new terminal extension. Doesn't know about the runway construction on 22 left. It just starts throwing planes into slots that don't exist physically, only digitally. I ordered another tequila. You celebrating something? Sal asked, eyeing my grin. Retirement, Sal, I said. I'm watching the sunset. It's 4 p.m., Nick. It's sunset somewhere, I said, specifically in the career of a guy named Blake. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Blake. I stared at the name on the screen. Blake Boss. I deleted the contact. Now it was just a number. I let it ring until it stopped. The bartender turned up the TV volume. Breaking news, the anchor said. Reports of significant ground delays at JFK and LaGuardia. Passengers are reporting confusion and cancellations. Apparent system-wide outage for a regional carrier. I raised my glass to the TV. Cheers, Courtney, I whispered. Hope that proactive mindset is working out for you. By 5:00 p.m., the airline wasn't just delaying flights, it was effectively paralyzed. The FAA doesn't play games. When you lose control of your ground tracking, they issue a ground stop. That means nothing moves. Planes that are in the air are diverted to other airports. Planes on the ground stay there. It is the nuclear option. And for an airline, it costs about $50,000 a minute. I was on my 3rd tequila when the news showed a clip of the terminal. It was a sea of angry people. You know the look, mothers with crying babies, businessmen screaming at gate agents who make $15 an hour, college kids sitting on their suitcases eating pretzels. It was Dante's Inferno with fluorescent lighting. Back at HQ, I imagined the scene was different. According to Mike, who was now live texting me the play-by-play like a war correspondent, old man Henderson had arrived. Henderson is 80 years old, walks with a cane that looks like a weapon, and possesses a temper that could peel paint off a wall. He didn't just walk into the boardroom, he stormed in. What in the unholy hell is going on? Henderson reportedly roared. Blake was sweating through his expensive suit. It's a glitch, Dad, a cyber attack, we're being hacked. It's not a hack, you moron, Henderson yelled. I just got off the phone with the FAA. They say our transponder codes are scrambling. Who is running ops? Courtney is, overseeing it, Blake stammered. Henderson looked at Courtney, who was currently crying into her detox tea. Where is Nicole? Henderson asked. The question that should have been asked 2 hours ago. We let her go, Blake whispered. You what? This is the part I love. The realization. The moment the coyote realizes he ran off the cliff. She wasn't a culture fit. Courtney wailed. She was negative. She was the only one who knew how to run the damn airline. Henderson screamed. Get her on the phone. She's not answering, Blake said. Then go to her house, drag her back here, but they couldn't because I wasn't home. I was at the final approach, eating stale peanuts and watching the carnage. But I had left them a little breadcrumb. See, I knew this day would come. I'm paranoid. I'm an ops manager. My job is to expect the worst-case scenario. On my desk, under a pile of manuals, I had left a sealed envelope. It wasn't hidden, but you had to actually look for it. It was labeled, in case of emergency, break glass or open envelope. Mike told me later that he found it. He handed it to Henderson. Henderson tore it open. Inside wasn't a password. It wasn't a key. It was a single sheet of paper. On it, I had printed the system architecture map, a spiderweb of lines connecting the servers to the dispatch software. In the middle, circled in red marker, was a node labeled User, nvance/personal script directory. And below that, a copy of the compliance agreement I signed back in 2014. The one that said personal tools are the responsibility of the employee. And a sticky note, Clause 4, Section B. Upon termination, all personal workflow optimizations are automatically purged from the active server to protect intellectual property and security. Liability for system dependencies on personal tools rests with the administrator who authorizes the termination. You trusted your son with the keys, Henderson, but I built the engine. Nick, Henderson, read it. His face apparently went from red to purple to a terrifying shade of white. He looked at Blake. You fired her, Henderson said, his voice quiet. The scary kind of quiet. And you didn't check for dependencies? She didn't tell us, Blake whined. It was her job to run the system. It was your job to know what the hell the system was. Henderson threw the paper at him. You just purged the operating system because you didn't like the wallpaper. Fix it. Henderson barked at the IT guys. We can't, the lead tech said, looking pale. The scripts are gone. They were tied to her user profile. When she logged out, poof, we have to rebuild the routing logic from scratch. How long? Weeks. Maybe months to get it fully automated again. We have to go manual. For modern airline, going manual is like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube while falling out of a plane. You have to use whiteboards, phones, and paper strips. It slows everything down by 80%. The airline was effectively dead in the water. And me? I ordered some mozzarella sticks. They were delicious. My phone started blowing up around 6:30 p.m. First, it was Blake again. 7 missed calls. Then a text, Nick, please pick up. We can work this out. We'll double the severance. Double the severance. 4 weeks pay. Wow, don't spend it all in one place. I blocked him. Then Courtney. Nicole, this is really unprofessional. People are suffering. You need to be the bigger person. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated gall of this woman to lecture me on professionalism while she was responsible for stranding 5,000 people in Newark. I replied, try using the proactive mindset to fly the planes, Courtney. Maybe manifest a flight plan, then I blocked her too. Then the big one. Caller ID Henderson SR. I stared at the phone. I respected Henderson. He was an asshole, but he was a competent asshole. He built the company. He knew the grit. But he also let his idiot son treat me like garbage. He stepped aside and let the vibe shift happen because he wanted to retire to Florida and play golf. He was complicit. I let it ring 3 times, then I picked up. Hello, Nicole. Henderson's voice sounded old, tired. It's a shit show down here, I noticed, I said. The news says you guys are breaking records for cancellations. Cut the crap, Nick. The kid's screwed up. I know it, you know it, but you're hurting the airline. You're hurting the brand. I didn't hurt anything, sir. I was fired. I left. The system did exactly what it was programmed to do, protect its security integrity. Smartass, he grunted, look, come back tonight, I'll fire Blake. I'll fire the Barbie doll, you name your price. Just get the damn planes in the air, this was it, the victory lap. I could walk back in there, save the day, be the hero. I could get a raise. I could have Blake crying in the parking lot, it was tempting. God, it was tempting. Fixer and me was screaming to go press the buttons and make the red lights turn green. But then I thought about the last 2 weeks. I thought about the streamlining. I thought about the disrespect. If I went back, nothing would really change. Henderson would eventually die. Blake would eventually inherit the company again, and I'd just be the janitor cleaning up their mess until I dropped dead of a stress-induced stroke. I can't do that, sir, I said. Name your number, Nicole. 200K, 250. It's not about the number, I said, swirling my drink. It's about the liability. You see, if I come back now and fix it, I'm admitting that I sabotaged it. I'm admitting that the system was dependent on me in a way that was negligent. Lawyers would have a field day. I'll sign a waiver. No, I said firmly. The bridge is burned, Henderson. You let them light the match. You have to sit in the ashes. Nicole, please, he said. He sounded broken. I'm losing $10 million a day. You should have thought about that before you replaced your structural engineer with an influencer, I said. Goodbye, Mr. Henderson. I hung up. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt, it was lightness. For the first time in 11 years, the planes weren't my problem. I paid my tab. Sal looked at me with respect. You look different, Nick. I feel different, Sal. I feel streamlined. I took an Uber home. The driver was listening to the radio. Airline stocks plunging in after hours, trading as operations at Air Regional grind to a halt. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. The silence was beautiful. Saturday morning, I slept in until 10 o'clock a.m. That hasn't happened since the Clinton administration. I made coffee, good coffee, from beans, not the powdered despair we had at the office. I sat on my porch and opened my laptop. My inbox was a disaster zone. 34 emails from Blake, 12 from HR, 3 from legal threatening to sue me. Good luck with that. I had the compliance doc. I marked them all as spam. Then I opened LinkedIn. I changed my status from operations lead at Air Regional to independent aviation systems architect. I made a post. Just a simple text post, available for immediate consultation regarding legacy system integration, crisis management, and crew routing logic. Proven track record of maintaining 99.8% uptime. Unlike some, I understand that cloud computing doesn't mean actual clouds. Within 10 minutes, I had 5 DMs. Recruiters are like sharks, they smell blood in the water. But one message stood out. It was from David Chen. David is the VP of Operations at Transcontinental, our biggest rival. They fly the same routes, use the same airports, but they charge $50 more a ticket because they pretend to be fancy. Message, Nicole, saw the news. Assuming the meltdown at AR is related to your availability, we've been trying to crack their routing efficiency for years. If you're free, I'd love to buy you lunch. Today, name the place. I smiled. Transcontinental had been trying to poach me for years, but I was loyal. I was stupidly, blindly loyal to Henderson. Loyalty is a currency that depreciates the longer you hold it. I replied, Steakhouse on 5th, noon, bring a contract. I showed up wearing a blazer and jeans. David was already there, looking like a man who just won the lottery. Nicole, he said, shaking my hand, you look rested. Unemployment suits me, I said. We ordered steaks. We skipped the small talk, so David said, cutting into his ribeye. What happened? I fired the pilot and tried to fly the plane with an iPad, I said. David laughed. Classic, Blake and the fiancé. Ouch, well, their losses? Frankly, a catastrophic gain for anyone else. Look, Nicole, we know you built their routing logic. We know it's better than ours. We want you to come build it for us. I can't give you their code, I said. That's IP. I don't want their code, David said. I want your brain. I want you to look at our system and tell us how to make it flow like yours did. We'll pay you a retainer, consultant basis. You set your hours, you work from home. He slid a piece of paper across the table. The number on it made my eyebrows hit my hairline. It was triple my salary at Air Regional. Triple. And David added, we have a strict no nepotism policy in ops. No sons, no fiancés, just engineers. I looked at the contract, looked at the number. I thought about Blake sweating in the boardroom trying to figure out why the planes wouldn't move. I picked up the pen. One condition, I said, name it. I want full autonomy. If I say a system needs to be fixed, it gets fixed. No committees, no vibe shifts. Done, David said. I signed. Welcome to the dark side, David grinned. The dark side pays better, I said, and the coffee is probably fresher. As I left the restaurant, I checked the news on my phone. Air Regional had canceled 80% of their flights for Sunday. Their stock was down 14%. There were rumors of a class action lawsuit from passengers. I felt a twinge of pity, just a twinge, like a muscle spasm. Then I looked at my new contract and it went away. Monday morning. The day the world goes back to work, unless you work for Air Regional. In which case, Monday was just day 4 of the hostage crisis. I was sitting in my living room, wearing pajamas, logged into the Transcontinental servers. Their system was a mess, clunky, bloated code, but it was fixable. I was already rewriting their dispatch protocols. It was like surgery, clean, precise. I had music playing. I had a candle burning. It was the most peaceful workday of my life. On the TV in the background, CNN was broadcasting a live press conference from Air Regional HQ. I turned up the volume. Blake was at the podium. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. His tie was crooked. The glow he had from Bali was gone, replaced by the gray pallor of a man who knows his inheritance is evaporating. Courtney was nowhere to be seen. Rumor had it she fled to Chillum to realign her chakras when the first death threats started rolling in on Twitter. We are working around the clock to resolve the technical difficulties, Blake stammered into the microphone. We have brought in top experts. Mr. Henderson, a reporter shouted. Is it true that the outage was caused by the firing of your operations lead? Blake flinched. That is an internal personnel matter. We are moving forward with a new, robust system. Robust, the reporter pressed. You have planes stranded in Des Moines with rotting seafood in the cargo holds. How is that robust? I took a sip of my coffee. Get him, I whispered. And what about the reports? The reporter continued. That your former lead is now consulting for Transcontinental? Is that why their on-time performance jumped 5% this morning while yours is at 0? Blake froze. He actually stopped breathing for a second. He looked like a deer in headlights if the deer was wearing a $5,000 suit and was an idiot. I have no comment on that, Blake squeaked. The camera panned to the side. Old man Henderson was standing in the wings. He wasn't looking at Blake. He was looking at the floor. He looked defeated. He knew right then that the game was over. Transcontinental was already absorbing their passengers. We were honoring their tickets for a small fee, of course. We were eating their lunch, drinking their milkshake, and taking their parking spots. My phone buzzed, a text from Mike. Dude, Blake just threw up backstage. Henderson is firing everyone. He's talking about selling the airline to Spirit. Spirit, Nick. We're gonna be the Greyhound of the skies. I replied. Get out, Mike. Send your resume to David Chen. I'll put in a word on it. I closed my laptop. I didn't feel like a hero. Heroes saved the burning building. I felt like something else. I felt like a force of nature. I was the gravity that kept the planes up, and I was the gravity that brought them down. They treated me like a mechanic. They forgot that the mechanic is the only one who knows how to cut the brake lines without leaving a trace. I walked to my window. I live under the flight path of the airport. A plane roared overhead. A Transcontinental 737. It was on time. It was climbing steep and fast, cutting through the clouds. I raised my coffee mug to it. Fly safe, I said. Blake lost his job a week later. The airline was sold for part 6 months after that. Courtney started a podcast about overcoming toxic workplaces. I listened to one episode. It was mostly ads for gut health powder. Me, I'm still consulting. I make more money in a month than I used to make in a year. I bought a boat. I named it the Override. Sometimes when I'm drinking alone and listening to the hum of the servers, I miss the chaos of the OCC. I miss the smell of burnt popcorn. But then I check my bank account, and I remember competence is expensive, disrespect is unaffordable, and revenge is just efficient routing. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.